Hi, I'm Teresa Younger, President and CEO of the Ms. Foundation for Women. The Ms. Foundation strives to build women's collective power in the United States to advance equity and justice for all. We achieve our mission by investing in and strengthening the capacity of women-led movements to advance meaningful social, cultural, and economic change in the lives of women. This year, we are proud to support the Latinx House's Healing Through Storytelling panel at Sundance. The Latinx House is a nonprofit initiative that aims to change the image of the Latinx community by elevating and by amplifying the voices and content created by Latinx artists, entertainers, policy experts, and grassroots organizers. I hope you enjoy this panel that explores the sharing of truth as a pathway towards healing.
Hi, I'm Rupa Bella Subramanian, and I'm the Vice President of Field Resourcing at the Pop Culture Collaborative. The Pop Culture Collaborative is a philanthropic resource and funder learning community working to transform the narrative landscape in America around people of color, immigrants, refugees, Muslims, and Indigenous peoples, especially those who are women, queer, transgendered, and/or disabled. Through partnerships between the social justice sector and the entertainment, advertising, and media industries, the Pop Culture Collaborative works to build widespread public yearning for a more just and pluralist society. This year, we are so proud to support Latinx House's Healing Through Storytelling panel at Sundance. The Latinx House is a nonprofit initiative that aims to change the image of the Latinx community by elevating and amplifying the voices and content created by Latinx artists, entertainers, policy experts, and grassroots organizers. I hope you enjoy this panel that explores the role that creators play in helping communities share their truths and lived experiences in a way that is both honest and provides a pathway towards healing. Thank you so much and enjoy.
Hi, friends. It's Monica Ramirez, co-founder of the Latinx House, and we are so thrilled to be here with you during Sundance 22. It was a part of the Latinx House's activation this year, and we have a really important topic that we wanted to bring to the House. You know, oftentimes when people talk about our community or even ask us to talk about ourselves, we're often portrayed in stereotypical manners, and we also are often asked to bear some of the most difficult experiences that we've ever had in our lives. Our full stories are not brought to the fore, but we all know that the 62 million Latinx people who live in the United States, we have stories about joy and success. We have stories about the pain that we've experienced and the struggle, but we have so many important stories to tell. And the Latinx House believes in lifting up all of those stories. We are committed to lifting up the excellence of the Latinx community in entertainment and in many other ways. We want people to know who we are as givers and contributors in this nation. And we don't want people to have a one-sided view of us and our community. And so I have the chance to be joined today with incredible individuals who believe that too, and who are doing it every single day in their work. With me today, I have Annie Gonzalez, who is an actress who is on fire, and she is going to talk to us about some of the work that she is doing. Annie, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much, Monica. I'm so excited and grateful to be here with you and all the other beautiful panelists here as well.
Thank you. And next to Annie, we have Eduardo Rodriguez, who is my friend for many years, proud to be a board member of the Friends of the National Museum of the American Latino alongside him and following his leadership as the executive director and also principal at the Raven Group. Hi, Eduardo, nice to have you here.
Great to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share this virtual stage with such amazing talent that are out there telling our stories. Monica, thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, we have the joy of being here today with Donatio, who is making moves in Hollywood, is showing up for us, not just through the stories that he's telling. I have a story that I want to share when I was reading up and that really brought me so much joy too. But you've been doing this for so many years, not just on the screen. And so we get the privilege of learning from you today and all the ways that you're lifting up our community. Thank you so much for being here.
My honor to be here. Thank you for having us.
course. All right, so we're going to jump right in because we have limited time, and we know that you all want to hear exactly the ways that these individuals, these fierce folks from our community, are helping to change things so that there isn't a one-sided story about our community. So I'm just going to kick it off with this question that's really for all three of you. Nanny, I'm going to ask you to start. So as I was saying in my introduction, we're often called upon to talk about some of the most traumatic things that have ever happened to us in our lives. And that's difficult to ask people to do. It's difficult to ask storytellers to do, and for the community to constantly take in. And I would love to hear from you sort of how do you see your role as a creator and a storyteller in changing this, and why is it so necessary to change it?
First and foremost, I want to pay homage and show gratitude to my predecessors who have done so much work before me for me to occupy the space that I'm in currently. Growing up, I'm sixth generation Chicana from East LA, didn't grow up speaking Spanish, and felt really far removed from my culture. But within that as well, I was never fed information that made me feel as though I couldn't occupy these spaces. So as I began my career, I remember thinking like, I can be the leading female ingenue. I am Bette Midler. I'm Barbara Streisand. I'm all of these people. So I understand that I grew up with that sense of privilege. So as I grew as a professional in this industry, I've been so fortunate to not have to play the stereotypical roles. I got to play an adjunct college professor who graduated from Stanford as a breakout role on Gentefied. I mean, yes. And I know that could not have been done. And thank you, Marvin and Linda. Thank you to Macro. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to America, everyone that had their hand on this. And again, to the people that came before me. And now even more so, I'm here in Mexico City right now, and being more involved in my culture and learning more Spanish and taking Chicano studies classes, I realize how important it is, especially through the messages that I've gotten from la gente who told me. I had someone who messaged me and said, my whole life I'd never felt beautiful until I saw Gentefied. And because I had never seen myself represented in these spaces as a strong, educated Latinx woman. And I then realized, wow, I also had never felt beautiful until I saw America Ferrera on Real Women Has Curves, and it's still our pain. It's still real, but it's a different sector. It's not so much embedded in so much deep rooted historical trauma. It's pain in a different way. It's more palpable so that we can release little by little and get to the root of these things. So it's so important. And I'm so honored to be just a small piece of the change and to be able to move with you guys. So thank you.
Thank you, Annie. And Donatio, I'm going to ask you to answer next, because you're doing very similar work and have for a long time. And can I just insert this little story that I read about you, because it made me both giggle. So I was reading about how you used to spend time with your mama in her salon, and you would sort of listen to the people that she was around and working with, and sort of that's where you started to form your first idea of characters in our community. And I loved that so much, because I can only imagine the people who you met. So that story brought me joy, and thank you for that.
I think one of the beautiful things about stories is that it allows us to know what's possible for us. And so when there are children or even adults watching narratives that have limiting borders around what we can be, it limits our perspective of what we think we can be. Like when a child goes to a school and they're being frisked down, or they walk through a security metal detector and they're already treated like criminals, it's almost framing their mind that this is the character that they have to play in life, right? And so one of the privileges and honors that I have is when I get hired onto a story, I will honor whatever's being told, but then I also challenge it to try to find the nuance, to try to see what they're doing and how we can elevate it, or how we can shift it so that the people who are witnessing the mirror of our work and looking at themselves have an opportunity to question, how have I been limited? Where are spaces that I can expand, and what are other possibilities for me to grow into? So I just know that being told what I was supposed to be as a first generation American, or how much space I was allowed to take was a conditioned understanding by both the culture, but also one that I inherited and had no say in. So as I've been
Mm.
working in Hollywood, one of the things that I had to unlearn was I can take up space and my word does have value. My lived experience and the culture that I come from is important. And learning not to apologize for challenging the the higher ups, because I see even the framing of how I said that I'm actually contributing and collaborating, but I almost like come in with the temptation is to come in with your tail between your legs and be like, oh, I don't want to ruffle feathers, as opposed to, hey, here's a great idea, because other people
Yeah.
in this industry, particularly non POC, feel that authority. They feel that sense of responsibility and that they can do this, and it's somebody else's problem if their feathers get ruffled.
I appreciate that so much, because I have to say, as an organizer who started working around entertainment, it was so like kind of mind-blowing for me, because I was like, what do you mean you don't get to ask about that? What do you mean you don't get to push back? And folks were like, you don't push back because then you won't get to work again. So I just really have such great appreciation for what you're saying, because I know it takes a lot of courage. And so thank you for your leadership and courage. Eduardo, you and I have been in conversation over many years about the harm that can be enacted on the way that our community has been stereotypically portrayed. And you are working on this from a very different angle. Could you share a little bit about how you are working to address this problem and the opportunities you see?
Absolutely. And look, I'm listening to the stories from Annie and Donative, and really it really does remind me that this campaign that I've been honored to be a part of for 17 years, which actually started almost 30 years ago, back in 1994, thanks to Raul Izaguirre's leadership as the head of NCLR. This has been a almost 3-decade-long campaign to simply have a home on the National Mall, where 20+ million tourists come from, not only around the country, but around the world. They come to Washington, D.C. to learn America's history. And for all of these decades, there hasn't been one home or even a section large enough to begin to touch the history of the American Latino community. 500 years of stories that have no home on our National Mall. These experiences, these contributions that begin with not just fighting in every major battle in this country, but actually helping supply George Washington with the equipment he needed to fight that battle. How many people know that Central Americans worked with Mexicans and the Spanish to create supply routes to help George Washington? Like, if that story was in our history books, then we wouldn't have this identity issue when we look at our role and our proper place in American history. We would just own it, right? We wouldn't say George Washington. We'd be like, oh, Jorge, of course, I know. My family helped it. My families helped, open the doors for our American society that we know today. So this has been an amazing educational journey for me, because I did not start knowing that this was a campaign I was going to run. I started first generation. My family's from Peru, came to Washington, D.C. in the 60s, just knew I had to go to college, and then followed the next step and went to law school, and then said, I got to get a job. These are things that you kind of do as a first generation, where you just assume you've got to do better than your parents did. And it landed me in the situation where I have learned so much around our country, our culture, the role we've played, and how many stories are missing every day that sometimes leave our children, because I've got 3 now, sometimes leave our children with that a misperception that somehow we just got here, that we're just now, a new immigrant community, but we've been here. I'll stop because, I can go on. Just thank you for the storytelling. And that's what I've been trying to work. Annie, could jump in, because I see.
I was going to say, I
That's
agree to
powerful.
that. Being 6th generation, I tell everyone all the time, I didn't cross the border crossed us. And that's not even in our history books
That's right.
really.
Period.
And
That's right.
that's and growing up, me not wanting to identify with my Latinidad because it wasn't. I always felt like I needed to assimilate to white culture, to anything that wasn't POC. So yes, Eduardo, everything that you are doing, I'm so excited.
I would love to hear from you about how have stories that you have consumed over the years, how have they helped, stories about us, stories about our community, how have they helped you heal? And in the work that you're doing, each of you, how are you helping other people learn the power of these stories to heal? Because I don't want us to pass over that. I think it's important for us to lift up the power of storytelling and healing, and you each do it so beautifully in your own way. So I'd love to just hear a little bit more from each of you about how it's helped, how these stories have healed you as people, and how you are making an offering to others.
It's funny, the stories that I have had the honor of telling, being on Vida or being on Promised Land now, I don't know if it's cosmic, like, construction or something. It just, they lined up to where I am in my life. I think with Vida, it was a queer, gender non-conforming, loud immigrant story that I got to tell. And what I found healing there was like taking ownership of both your masculine and your feminine sides, really looking at and challenging how the Latin community deals with queerness and deals with people who don't live in the binary, and the means of survival that we have to do in order to protect ourselves, but then the feathers that we get to like showcase for free, right? And then on Promised Land, I've had the ability and the power to confront what shame and what happens to a person when they're betrayed by their own family, and the sense of like machismo or male arrogance that one has when they're the firstborn son, and the entitlement that they feel that they have over their family. And so it's just been fascinating to explore these different facets of Latinidad, but also just like our mental health and how we understand each other, and get to present it in front of someone else. Like it's not just me showcasing like this, but it's also me dealing it with myself and being like, oh shit, I didn't know that was there. Like, that's pretty interesting.
Some of the stories that have helped me heal, things that I've watched, Real Women Have Curves was the first thing that I saw that I felt like I saw myself in, and being able to also be on Vida, where most of the set was women and queer women at that, where that our showrunner Tania Saracho, the creator, was also just this brilliant powerhouse of a mujer who was unapologetically herself. And I believe it always starts from the top. So I think having writers, showrunners, producers, studio heads that are people of color, really, that's what changes the narratives of as how we're able to walk in and embody these stories and find, like you said, the different nuances of ourselves, Donna, to be able to be like, wow, I'm the masculine and the feminine, and oh, there's more of this that I even knew that I could find about myself through art. Art itself is history. Throughout history, there has been art in every single thing. So it makes sense why we do need a museum that is representative of us, because how do we know that we exist? And if all we're existing in our art is the maid, the whore, the saint, how do we know our full spectrum of what we could be? So my honor in this industry is to be able to live in my most authentic self. I am, we are not a monolith. I'm not trying to portray every Latina, in this, in the world, but to tell the stories, like you said, that align with me. And I'm so grateful that I've had that privilege to do so. And I know because more people were rising up the ladder, and behind the scenes, we're going to be able to tell more stories like that. I think for so long, film and television, because of the way they were ran, we didn't have the freedom to feel like we could walk in as our full selves. Most of the things that I auditioned for, even as a child, was, can you put a little accent on that? Can you be a little more Latinx or Latina or whatever, what have you? And I remember being like, I don't know if that's possible because I am. Like, I don't understand. So I think because the narratives are changing there, we're walking into rooms. It's like Donna, how you had spoken to earlier, like, oh, I am contributing to this idea by participating in the conversation. And now I think we're becoming stronger as a people in ourselves and owning our Latinidad and understanding that, like, yes, I am a proud Chicana, feminista, activista, educated young woman who will wear my hoops and my red lipstick to the board meeting. Let's go.
Let's go.
The duality, right? So that's what I'm excited to bring to this. Like, I played a Stanford graduate with a shaved head. Okay, like, I want more of that, the nuances. Like, let's confuse it, let's gender bend. So that is, I pray and I hope and I know that it's coming because we have beautiful people like Donna, like Monica, and like Estuardo on our team. So
the collections that are going to be built, you shared some about sort of the 500 years of our history and the representation of our community. But the stories that are going to be told are going to be of the struggle and the triumphs. And why is that something that you want to make sure our kids know? The struggles and the triumphs.
History is ugly and beautiful, right? I've traveled for now 17 years from the East Coast to the West Coast. And honestly, it's been like an internship for me to learn about American history through the eyes of the various communities that live within our Latinidad. So if I was in South Florida and many of the Cubans say, no, ese va a ser un museo de los mexicanos. And if I was in Southern California or even South Texas, they would say, it's going to be a museum for the Spanish and it's going to whitewash the Spanish atrocities. I don't want any part of that. And depending on where you go, there's always a challenge within our own community of, well, how do you define the Latino story? How are you going to curate those stories so that I am part of it as well? And that's not even touching on the Afro-Latino experience that helped feed one of the iconic sports in our country, right? Baseball. The Afro-Latinos were playing in baseball when it was the Negro Leagues. Panameños, Dominicanos, they were always part of that iconic sport. Though storytelling, though, is something that ultimately does come down to inclusivity, because not everyone's going to be happy with history and how it's presented. But we have to make sure to include every story. In the end, we're tied together because of the beauty, because of the culture, because of the music, because of the language. But we still find division even in those areas because everyone, grew up with salsa versus cumbia versus bachata. Everyone grew up with something different. And if who's in charge of the music is the DJ. Now you pick the DJ, I'll just come dance for, right? There's going to be a difference no matter what. So as I've often told people as we traveled around, whether we were in Chicago or in Denver, Colorado, and these divisions came up, I would say, trabajamos juntos y cuando entramos al museo, ahí nos peleamos. We got to work together first to get into that museum to make it real. Once it's there, just like every Thanksgiving in La Familia, we can hash it out and let it rip. It's gonna take everyone, and especially the storytelling part, because I like to tell people this museum isn't open yet. So the more we tell stories now, the more we're able to educate people today, the better we're gonna have an impact on that next generation. And that also comes down to the people in DC. And Monica, you know very well, and all the amazing work that you do. Living story is in, Congresswoman Ileana Ross-Layton, the first Latina ever elected to Congress. Javier Becerra, who represented LA, now the Health and Human Services Secretary, he sponsored the bill to create the American Latino Museum back in 2004 with Ileana Ross-Layton, Democrat, Republican, came together, and 17 years later, here's where we are. But they laid the seed on Capitol Hill. Those are the living stories that we'll also pass on to the actual museum.
So proud to be a board member of Friends, and so grateful, Eduardo, for all that you're doing and appreciative of how you're putting it all in context for us. All right, I want to go back to something, Donatiu, that you said.
Yeah.
You were talking about, how you're selecting these roles, and they're not always, you're pushing them to their limits, right? They're not always exactly how you think they could be portrayed. And I would love to hear more from you about role selection because, as I said, I'm not from the entertainment industry, but I've spoken with lots of folks and I'm friends with lots of folks who are in the industry. And sometimes people don't feel like they necessarily have a choice. So would you share a little bit about sort of the role, like how you go about role selection and why it is so important for you to kind of have your own methodology around that?
I think when it comes to role selection, it's dating. It really is dating. It comes down to
Mm.
it. It comes to relationships. Sometimes I love a project and I may not be the perfect fit for it for whatever reason. But I really do believe that when it aligns, I'm meant to be there and I'm bringing my whole self to that. And so ultimately, things that interest me, obviously, I love a good story. I love something that's well written, something that is the dialogue is ripe and fruitful. But I especially love collaborators who trust who they hired, who are willing to listen. And it's not necessarily like, who am I to tell them change your story? Like, that's not the energy that I want to bring on set anyway. But it's always a space of curiosity. When I got hired here, one of the questions that I brought up was, in America, race relations seems to be very black and white, on the forefront. But in Mexico, it's very indigenous versus like white patriarchy. It's white versus indigenous. And so I was thinking, how can we, like, based off of the casting that we have, in nuanced ways, just explore how we treat the more indigenous person in the set, and then challenge that? Or how does misogyny work into this? How does, like, what arrogance does my character have over his sister who's older, but because I'm the oldest male, how do I treat her in these things? And I know these are small details, but they really carve out a larger world that allows us to look at ourselves and be like, "Oh, that's kind of behavior. Oh shit, I do that. Oh shit, maybe I should like reevaluate how I behave with my own family." And so I like spaces where I'm able to pick up on those, or like have those conversations with with the showrunner, or with the writers, or even with the cast, in how we portray the characters.
And I'm about to have a little therapy here by myself with listening to you.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. And also, Promised Land is coming, and we want to make sure that we support. And also, I just want to know next Monday, and you said ripe and you said fruitful, and I thought it's all in the storyline too, right? So we are ready. We are ready. Annie, you've talked about how you've had this privilege of playing. I saw myself in that Stanford professor, right? I saw that struggle, and I know so many other people did. And you said you had this privilege of playing roles of folks that we wouldn't necessarily always get to play. So for you, what is the story? What is the selection process like to choose the roles that you're going to play? Because I'm sure there are many that maybe you aren't down with.
Similarly to Donna, I am very selective. If there's something that I necessarily don't resonate with, I won't go out for those things, because I understand myself, my scope, my worldview, and I don't want to do a disservice to anything that someone else would be much better suited for, first and foremost. Thereafter, I think having the experience that I have had, and just my scope of the world and how I view manifestation. When I shaved my head initially, I remember all of my industry friends, I think even Donna I had talked about it, and everybody was like, "Girl, how are you gonna book? You really, like, you think you're gonna work? Like, what roles are you gonna go out for now? What's your demographic?" Like, like, I remember everybody coming at me with these questions, and I was like, whatever I want. I was like, this has nothing to do with all of this and what I'm going to bring to it. I'm an actress. I'm a chameleon. I'm an artist. I am a shapeshifter. I can play these roles and give you the totality of what you need, regardless of what my hair looks like, what my makeup looks like, what I weigh, all of these things. So I've always taken into account that oh captain, oh my captain, I'm the master of my fate. I am the sailor of the ship. I'm the one that runs this. This is my career, and I refuse to let an industry dictate how I move through it. And I think that that is empowering. And I think you feel that when walking into a room. I think we all feel it, right? Like even the energy here, all of us are standing in our full selves. And so when you go into reading a project, when you're reading a bill, when you're trying to get legislations passed, you're like, no, I'm going to push for this. I don't care what you see. I know what I know, and I'm going to do it. So that's how, and I'm really adamant about playing just multifaceted, dimensional women who challenge the status quo. And I think I've been able to do that thus far, even on the next series that I'll be working on, Once Upon a Time in Aslan, which I'm so excited for. I mean, I want to continuously play enigmas and just show us that with that, we get to see white faces do it all the time. And we've identified with the Bette Midlers and with the Cameron, and with all of these beautiful, beautiful artists. I would like to be one of them. I would love to be invited to the red table talks and actor circles.
You are.
You are.
Yes, and
are.
I am, and
You
I'm
are-
here.
you
We're doing
are.
it now. We are.
You are. And we need you both to teach a master class. We each are going to get a master class because everyone needs to hear what you're saying.
And this is why we need our faces, our stories, our history told, because then it just lets us be more of what we are. Eduardo, what you were saying, like, yeah, maybe not everyone's going to agree or like it, but that's not the point. That's not what we want. I don't want you to like what I do. I want it to challenge you. You don't like it? Amazing. What did it make you feel? Make something else. I love that.
Absolutely.
Here for that.
So good. And I'm glad that you brought Eduardo and Annie, because you have worked over the years with folks in the entertainment industry, across the board, in film and TV and music, and because there obviously are such synergies between the museum and the art that's being made every day. Share a little bit about why you made that very strategic decision early on and what you see as opportunities for that relationship to grow.
Yeah, no, there's so much there, and I know we have limited time, so I'm trying to pick and choose in my head the stories to tell. But absolutely, the entertainment industry has always been a living and present and timely way to touch people through story. And we have seen throughout generations now the role of Latinas and Latinos in entertainment. Whether it's Desi Arnaz, who created the modern day sitcom with the 3 cameras, or we could move fast forward to many of the amazing Latinas and Latinos that we have as showrunners who are trying to break ground, like Gloria Calderon-Kellett, who's a big supporter of ours. But we see with each different generation, there's still so much more work to be done. It's a baton passing. And if we're going to educate people outside of Washington, D.C., because look, let's be honest, how many people tune into the news going, let's see what's happening in D.C. today? Not many people, because they know the dysfunction, and Monica, the dysfunction of Washington, D.C. and Capitol Hill. But when you have an opportunity to say, well, no, wait, this is actually something good. This is something really, really good. That's not going to be easy. No one told me when I raised my hand to help lead this that, oh yeah, it'll, about 15, 20 years, you'll get it done. They just said, hey, here's an opportunity where we can get this done, but we need people to make noise. And so I raised my hand for that, but I had there with me people like Emilio Estefan, part of the commission board that ultimately was created in 2008, Zeva Longoria. When we started the 501c3, Rosario Dawson was one of the first people that said, I'll help you out. And it just goes on because they bring their own platforms, not just to share the campaign, but to actually share with us their stories and their experiences to connect with more people so that it makes sense for them. Because as I mentioned before, the divisions within our community are clear. So you always have to find the right people that resonate with you. I can't always count on the one spokesperson. I have to open up the tent and make sure that everyone sees somebody within this tent that speaks to them and their experiences. The farm worker experience that I'm really excited to hear about and watch on Promised Land, that is something that so many people in this country know about. But does it apply to everyone, every Latino experience? It doesn't, which is why more and more of these stories need to be produced. There needs to be the funding behind them. There needs to be the actual campaign behind the studios to get these out there and get people to watch them. And that will feed that energy that we need to open those doors, because it ain't going to be cheap. It's going to cost us a lot of money to open those doors. And that's what we've always counted on the entertainment industry, to bring their volume to the conversation.
It's funny, Sordo, I think that you keep bringing up this concept of like no Latinos are created equal, right? And like we all have our own different stories, but I think in the same way that the Democratic Party or the Republican Party or America, like no one of us is created equal, we're not a monolith. The thing that Promised Land does that I like love is that if you can have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez be a Latino and Ted Cruz be a Latino, like the show does that. We have people who are on the farm, and then we have multi-billion-dollar industry, you know, right-wing people on the thing. And so not one of us has to carry the burden of being Latino. We don't have to be perfect. We can be messy, ugly, saints, beautiful, fall in love, whatever. We can be the monolith. We can just be people.
That's amazing. And you know, we worked with Cristela Alonso for a long time, and she's still a champion of ours. And she shared her frustration with her first show, which was they canceled her show, and she shared it openly because they said that, oh, Latinos couldn't identify with your show. Like she had to be the Latina for every Latino. And that's a huge burden to carry.
All of them.
Right. That's just crazy and a huge burden, but she's a champion. She keeps going.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And yes, we have a lot of work to do, and we are doing it, and you are doing it. And we at the Latinx House are so proud and honored to get to walk alongside each of you, because we know it is our collective power that is making the change. And we are out of time, and I hate that because I want to keep talking. We cannot leave here without giving folks some homework. So I'm going to just go really quickly. What is your call to action, each one of you? Annie, you go first.
My call to action, support Latinx shows, support anything that you can, watch it, find truth in it, find beauty, see yourself in the nuance of things. Just challenge yourself to maybe not necessarily always identify, but try and understand.
Right there with Annie. If you enjoy the content that we're producing, please support us, support past content. I know the industry is really trying to make it equal for an equal playing field, but again, this industry is run by dollars and by eyeballs. And so if you're not watching the content, it's not going to exist. And we can be crying on about like more representation, but we're really trying to crack open and break this glass ceiling. So without your viewership, we won't be able to do it. So watch the shows.
I echo them, watch the shows. But in addition to that, go online to learn about the American Latino Museum on social media. Share this mission, share the campaign, because we're not going to do it by ourselves. We can't wait for a smaller group of people in Washington, D.C. to get this done. It has to be representative of the 60 million Latinos around the country. That means you got a lot of people to connect with on social media the rest of this week and moving on to let them know that we've got to step up and make sure that the Smithsonian knows this museum must be built on the National Mall in our lifetime, and that the corporate dollars need to be there. All those people we buy from every day, that we feed with our dollars, they need to know that we expect them to support the telling of American Latino stories on our National Mall. Thank you so much, Monica.
Thank you, Eduardo. And we have had the pleasure of being here today with Donatiu, Annie, and Eduardo to talk more about how our storytelling can lead to healing. And they said it best: tune in, support our shows, support our creators. Don't miss Promised Land. Don't miss Once Upon a Time in Aztlán, and make sure that you get out to support the friends and all of the work that is being done to make sure that the National Museum of American Latino is on a place in the mall that we can all visit very soon. So thank you all. See you soon.